Good morning, everyone. Hey, it's Coffee Shop Thursday. You know that time when you can sit around the coffee table at your local coffee shop and drink some coffee with your friends and just show off how much you know about the Bible. Oh, yeah. But I'll tell you what I'm doing today. I'm not going to show off. In fact, I'm not even going to drink coffee. I'm going to have some tea instead. Mm, that's decent. That's decent. Tea, coffee, whatever you want to drink is fine. Hey, our gospel lesson for this coming Sunday is from John, and it's the 21st chapter of John. Last week we mentioned that this seems to be an addition to the gospel because the gospel ends at the end of chapter 20, and all of a sudden now there's this, one more thing kind of comes up. So we don't know, and scholars are really divided on it, whether John wrote this himself and just did it as a little add-on. Oh, I forgot to mention this, boom, type of thing, or if it was added later on by either a disciple of his or another editor, and it doesn't really matter. Our manuscripts that we have of the Gospel of John, as far back as they go, contain the 21st chapter. But it's a little bit different, and we'll take a look at that and see why. First of all, there are a lot of connections between this and other gospel passages. What's included in here is the fishing account. Peter decides to go fishing. A couple of the other disciples say, yeah, we're coming with you. They go out there, don't catch anything. And Jesus calling from the shore say, hey, toss it out on the other side. And they catch a whole bunch of fish. Doesn't that sound like a story we already heard in the Bible? You bet. In fact, we heard it this year in this year of Luke, Series C, Lectionary Series C. And it was at the beginning when Jesus is calling his disciples. And this is contained in the call of Simon Peter. Yeah, we've had that before. What about this? The fact that when Jesus calls them ashore and he's making breakfast for them on the beach, they didn't really recognize him until they start eating. Didn't we already have that story once before? Yeah, in the Gospel of Luke, the road to Emmaus, where two disciples are talking with Jesus for quite a long while. And it's not until they sit down to eat and he breaks the bread with them that they recognize him. Yeah, and what about the whole fact that the image of the bread and fish and things like that, where have we seen that before? Well, John includes a miracle that's found across all the Gospels, all four Gospels, the feeding of the 5,000. But the thing that's interesting is he uses a different word for fish than the other Gospels did. And that word for fish is only found in his version, the feeding of the 5,000, and right here as he feeds his disciples. Isn't that interesting? Also, the fact that he doesn't call it the Sea of Galilee, he calls it the Sea of Tiberias. What? Don't you know what your geography is all about, John? No, it's because the city of Tiberias was located on this lake, on this Sea of Galilee. And so it often went by that name as well. But only John uses that name, Tiberias. Just go ahead and show that knowledge of yours off a little bit with your friends around the coffee table, okay? But what about all this fishing stuff that's going on here? It's interesting that here we have to understand this. The gospel writer John, he loves to take stories, and remember, these authors of all the gospels, they are writing well beyond a generation or so after Jesus. So these are all stories that they've heard, and they're putting these stories together in a cohesive narrative about Jesus. John, he's the one that's a little bit different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and he really likes to inject a lot of stuff into his stories to bring out who Jesus is, what Jesus meant to the people then, what he means for us now in our lives. And he's writing relatively late. It's kind of cool that you have in here, for instance, when Jesus said, "Hey, toss the net on the other side, and you will find your fish over there. You'll find your catch." Well, that's exactly what happened. But that same word, find, is what is used at the very beginning of the gospel when it talks about Andrew finding Peter and Jesus finds Philip, and Philip finds Nathaniel. There's this whole picture of discipleship going on where people are finding one another as well as Jesus finding us. That's kind of a cool thing, isn't it? Now, the other thing I like is, and we can go on and on and on. There's so much in this final part of the Gospel of John that it's pretty cool. What about the number of fish that are caught? Specifically, it said they caught 153 fish. Who sat down and counted all the fish as they brought them in off the net? Come on, 153. What's that mean? Well, depending on what commentary you pick up, it means something different. We just don't know. It's kind of a mystery to this day. It'll probably be a mystery forever. But you know what? I think what it really means is an awful lot. They caught a lot of fish. And so if we are now to be fishers of people, we're to go out and get a lot of people in on this grand and glorious story of Jesus. Let's just look at it that way. The net was so full of fish, it wasn't torn. No, that word for torn is the same that's used of Jesus' garments that were not torn. Remember, as he's being crucified, they gambled them away so they wouldn't tear them. Okay, that's kind of interesting there. Yeah, and just after the fishing and the eating episode, and during that, you might remember that Jesus kind of interrogates Peter. Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you, Lord. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know I love you. 3 times that exchange goes on. And also within that, Jesus is telling Peter what he's to do. He's to take care of his sheep, to feed his sheep, tend to them. They're still Jesus' sheep, but Peter is to take care of them. But here's the zinger. We often try to make a real sharp distinction between the words for love that are used in the New Testament. And the 2 main ones are agape and phileo. Okay, agape and phileo. They're used interchangeably. And in this little dialogue between Peter and Jesus, it's back and forth, and they use them interchangeably. Okay, so don't try to make a great deal, a huge distinction. I know when I was growing up, that was part of the neatness that we found in the Bible. Oh, look, here's agape love and here's filial love, and these are yes and no. They're all about love, loving one another. Although agape does tend to be used a little bit more when it's talking about God's love toward us. All right. And there's so much more that goes into this. If you have your hands on a really good biblical commentary and try to find it, you can see how nuanced this whole last chapter of John is. In fact, you can just make a whole month's worth of Bible studies just out of this last chapter. And I'm not promoting in our Noel Bible study that we have that you do that. Noel meaning Niagara, Orleans, that's our 2 counties, evangelical Lutherans. Because we get stuck on 3 or 4 verses for a couple months sometimes. Seems like it anyhow. But this last chapter in the Gospel of John, the 21st chapter, even though it most likely was an addition to the original gospel, man, we would be the poorer without it. It is just chock full of good stuff for you and for me as we learn what it means to be fishing for people, but not only catch them, but to nurture them and feed them once they're in the fold. Good, good stuff. God's blessings be with you on this Coffee Shop Thursday, even though, like me, you may prefer a little tea. God's blessings be with you.